Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give some more general comments on the changes of the code. Some of the things I intended to talk about have already been discussed and by some others like Amy just before. Well, first I have to say I was shocked. Not only me, I suppose a lot of people have been shocked last year due to these changes, but after the shock I started to think about consequences, and I came to the conclusion that these changes are really drastic, but maybe the best solution that we have, because these changes offer the possibility for a better work in future. They give us the chance for more stability and flexibility in future. Well, I have to stress, the only mandatory provision of the new code in this direction to fungi is that descriptions of 2 or more names for the same fungus are forbidden in future. That is the only thing that we have to stress. Otherwise, we get much more freedom for the taxonomists, and negative impacts on the taxonomic work are relatively small. Well, recently, David Hawkesworth stressed after 2030, one fungus can only have one name. The system of permitting separate names to be used for anamorphs then ends. This is maybe not quite correct, or at least it could cause some confusion or misinterpretation by mycologists, because according to the new rules, according to the new Article 52, names published before the 1st January next year for the same taxon based on different morphs are neither considered to be alternative names nor treated as nomenclaturally superfluous. So these names, these old names published before 2013 are not illegitimate. They remain valid species or other taxa, valid names, and names that are valid may be used. They may be synonyms, as in plants and so on, but they may be used in future. I will come back to this point, because this point for the taxonomy is rather important, and later I will give some examples what I mean. Well, all these things, it was stressed by Amy, for instance, just before, are closely connected with taxonomy. And taxonomy and nomenclature is often confused, also here during this Congress. And we have to separate both things. The code only rules with a priority of names, which names we have to adapt, and that's all. The code does not give any rules for any molecular methods, cultural methods and other things. This is not, it is not a duty and the spirit of the code to give any limitations with regard to these technical things. And even molecular methods are often not quite clear, and the results are often debatable. We have a lot of questions. Is ITS sufficient? Often it is not sufficient. But how many markers, which markers have to be applied, and so on, all these questions. And what about the percentage of genetic similarity to speak of one species? This is a basic question, and I'm convinced nobody can answer this question. All these things depend on they are up to the taxonomist. The taxonomists have to decide about these questions. We have other problems. for instance, different circumscriptions of taxa in the past and in future. Taxa can be described in a broader sense, sensu lato, sensu stricto, and so on. We have implications of cryptic species. Often cryptic species are included in morphological, also sometimes in genetical, well-defined species. All these things make the whole issue rather complicated. At the end, or summarizing, I can say these questions have to be decided for all particular groups, particular cases, and this is a job by the taxonomist and not the job, and it is not ruled by the code. The code only rules which name has then to be applied. Well, a few words to the generic question and the generic issue, and this question, problems around the generic names are much more complicated than on species level. In any case, the new rules give us much more freedom than before, because now we can use any genus name that we want. We can propose any genus name. We can use anamorph-typified names. If they are older and preferred, we can use them immediately, no problem. If the anamorph-typified name is younger, we can also propose to use the name, and vice versa with the teleomorph-typified name. So we have a lot of freedom to choose the appropriate names for one name. This is a typical case is below on the slide. It is Cladosporium. The monograph of Cladosporium is close to be published, and we prefer to use the name Cladosporium instead of Davidiella, which is much younger, and it makes sense to use Cladosporium. This is a simple case because we can use Cladosporium immediately. Another case would be already mentioned yesterday and just before by Amy, Fusicladium and Venturia. I'm also in favor of Venturia because I know phytopathologists prefer Venturia. When we propose the younger name Venturia for the holomorph and consider Fusicladium as synonym, then we have a clear decision. But what about all these Fusicladium names that are unresolved? There are so many names. Yesterday, Pedro put the question, what to do with all these old names? These old species based on morphology and morphological types, material, they exist and they exist in nature, and people find these fungi in nature. What can we do with these fungi? I can only say they should not be, before we do not have any molecular evidence or evidence from cultures, they should not be automatically transferred by new combinations into Venturia, only if we have the evidence. They can just remain in Fusicladium, and Fusicladium remains a valid name. And valid names, also if it is then in future a synonym of Venturia, can be used. According to the code, a valid name can be used. It is like the remark with the dustbin from Walter. It is possible and we should do it. So we have the two names, and the old name Fusicladium can be used as dustbin for the rest, for the unresolved names. The same situation with Cladosporium. Cladosporium is anamorph-typified, a clear case. The type species Cladosporium herbarum is clearly linked with the teleomorph Davidiella, with the Davidiella state. But what about all these Cladosporium names which are unresolved without any cultures, without any molecular data? They can also remain in Cladosporium, of course. And it would even be possible for some people everywhere in the world to describe a new cladosporium just based on morphological material. It is not forbidden by the code. That is just taxonomy. I can use a genus. I think the arguments why I place a new species in a genus is up to me, is up to the taxonomists. It can be morphology, it can be molecular data, cultures, whatever. That is not ruled by the code. Well, okay, if we have younger names, well, I can make it short. Yes, we have a lot of much more flexibility. I can go to the next slide. A few words at the end to the powdery mildews. In the powdery mildews, we have a clear situation. The anamorphs and the anamorph genera that exist are clearly linked with teleomorph genera, and with the exception of the anamorph genus Oidium, all teleomorph names are older and have priority. That is okay and rather simple in the powdery mildews, and we do not need a lot of actions to solve problems. The connections, even with regard to morphology, are very clear. If you have a powdery mildew anamorph, you can examine the morphology and you can say, okay, this belongs to a certain teleomorph-typified genus. A clear case. But we have other problems in the powdery mildews. The problems are that the morphology of powdery mildew anamorphs are often meaningless. They are so uniform and little diagnostic that it is often rather difficult to say, does it belong to a certain teleomorph or not. This is difficult without molecular data and other special examinations, biological examinations, and so on. With regard to the genera, I would only shortly remark that the only critical case concerns the genus Oidium. Oidium, the anamorph genus, previously used in an extremely wide range for all kinds of powdery mildew anamorphs. The type species is Oidium monilioides. This is the proven anamorph of Plumeria graminis, the very important, also for phytopathologists, grass powdery mildew, with type species Plumeria graminis. So Oidium would be the older correct name for the genus. This is horror. Of course, nobody would accept it, and phytopathologists would hate it. That is impossible to make or to propose the combination Oidium graminis, which would be the correct name for this fungus. This is, of course, a case that we will stick to Plumeria graminis in future. But it's the only case, critical case, that we have in powdery mildews. But the other thing is, due to the meaningless of the morphology in many groups of powdery mildews, the anamorphs are little diagnostic, as I said. I would propose also for the future that powdery mildew anamorphs, new powdery mildew anamorphs found by the people, should not be described. People should not should not put names on it. But if some people, it's not forbidden, of course, intend to describe new species just based on the anamorph, they have two possibilities. They could, of course, due to the morphology, describe them under then the accepted teleomorph name as Eresife, Phylactinia, Podosfera, and so on. Would be possible, but I would advise they should use the old anamorph names, because the problem is even with molecular data you often do simply not know, is it a separate species or not. The morphology is poor and the available molecular data for comparison to say it is a separate new species are often absent. So it is rather difficult. I would prefer they should not describe such species in general at all, or they should use the old anamorph names, which are, and which remain, since published before 2013, they remain valid. So that is my proposal for the powdery mildews. Thank you very much.